Hello, and welcome to Inspire Tokyo. I'm Chris Galucci. The Inspire Tokyo podcast is brought to you by Kikoku Shijo Academy in Tokyo, Japan. On this show, we interview leading figures in science, the arts, education, business, and politics to help young bilingual students learn more about potential career paths for their future. Today on the show, my guest is Chad Fraser. Chad began his career with Cirque du Soleil as part of the performance medicine department at their headquarters in Montreal. Over the past 7 years, Chad has worked with 2 touring shows and is now currently the head therapist for Kurios. Before working at Cirque du Soleil, Chad received his Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology from St. Francis Xavier University, and then completed his Master of Science in Education and Sports Medicine from Old Dominion University, where he went on to teach courses in rehabilitation. He also worked for 7 years with Newport University's sports teams. If you have ever seen a live Cirque du Soleil performance, or even watched a video online, it is easy to see why they are the world's largest theatrical producer. The combination of elaborate stages and detailed costumes, live music, and acrobatic acts from world-class artists make for such a spectacular show. But what most people don't realize is that the world backstage is just as interesting. Chad Fraser brings us behind the scenes to see the world of Cirque from a unique point of view. We learn about the artists' lives, how they take care of their bodies, and how they stay mentally and physically prepared during their high-risk acts. Hi, Chad. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So let's jump right into it.
Yeah.
So you are the head therapist of Cirque du Soleil, and you're responsible for the health of all of the artists.
Of a particular show, Kurios.
Of a particular show, yeah. Kurios, which is touring right now in Japan.
That's correct.
Walk us through what you do during a show. Like from beginning to end, what are your responsibilities? What are you doing? Who are you working with?
Sounds good. So as the head therapist, I'm responsible for the complete medical care of the artists and the musicians in the show. So on a typical day, if I might start early in the afternoon, cover any kind of trainings, getting ready for the show, doing treatments, either of somebody that requires treatment from an injury or somebody that just wants to do some preventative treatment. As we get closer to the show, we're kind of getting ready, getting the artists ready to go for the show, maybe stretching them, taping them, getting them ready, whatever they might feel they need to be ready to go. When the show goes on, that's the only time that we can actually spend time documenting all of the treatments that we did during the day. So we have a live feed of a TV in our little space, which is in the artistic tent right outside of the actual big top tent. And I'm in a program pretty much putting all the medical information of the treatments that I did, documenting that. And then any high-risk act that goes on, I'm right beside the stage, ready to go in case anything were to happen or anything were to be necessary. And a high-risk act would be anything that has the potential of a fall or a collision between any artists. And then as soon as that act is over, I'm right back in my space, back in on the computer, or maybe getting caught up with meetings with the artistic director, or just having general conversations with the artists if somebody needs something that happens in real time during the show.
I see. And now, has there ever been a time where you were helping an artist in real time during the show, during another high-risk act going on stage? And if that happens, is there another trainer there?
That's a good question. So a lot of it kind of depends on, kind of like we talk like a triage, whatever's the most important thing. We would always try to be by the stage for those high-risk acts, but if an artist had an issue that they needed to talk about right away that was pertinent to them continuing in the show, that would take precedent. So depending on when the show is, which show, whether it's early or the late, in an early show, there's always 2 of us, but for the late show, that early person who was there early in the day, they've gone home already. So then we would be by ourselves. But because I have that live screen, if I have to be in there talking to somebody, I can look at that monitor and see exactly what's going on if I want to watch a particular movement. Because I've been doing this for so long and I've seen so many shows, over 1,500 of them, I know exactly where the show is based on the music. So if I'm talking to somebody, I can pause even for 2 seconds, look at the monitor and watch a particular act or a particular element, and then go right back to the conversation.
Wow. Over 1,500 shows.
Over 1,500 shows.
All right. So you are quite experienced,
I
say
would
the
say,
least.
yes.
So it's the largest, it being Cirque du Soleil, is the largest theatrical producer in the world. Is that right?
I think that's probably accurate. Yes.
Okay.
From a performing medicine, it's pretty, or performing arts, it's quite large.
Yeah. And so I have a few numbers here, which are very impressive that I want people to hear. In 2010, you've had over 5,000 employees $850 million in revenue. This is on Wikipedia, so public information. And you performed on every continent except for Antarctica. Why, from your position, has this been such a successful endeavor?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I mean, it's live entertainment. People love to see people do amazing things, whether it's sport, musicians, anything like that. When you combine the acrobatics with the music of Cirque du Soleil, that's one of the things that I think people really love. They love to see people using their bodies in amazing ways because as humans, we love to see other humans do things that we wish that we could do, whether it's the live singing with the costumes and the makeup and everything. I think it blends together so beautifully with the acrobatics and everything together. And no matter what continent you're on, people love to see people do amazing things.
Speaking about people doing amazing things, you've seen the show so many times. And while you're watching it, you're working, you're supposed to be focused. But within you being focused, are there still elements of the show that wow you to this day?
Absolutely. Even though when you have the repetitiveness of doing the same show, you still get amazed when you see people do amazing things. One of the things that I love about it is when I hear the audience give that type of approval and the applause, it keeps you in the moment of realizing that, wow, they really are performing their hearts out and they're just providing something that these people have never seen before. And that's what just keeps you in the moment.
Yeah. Do you have a particular show or a particular act of Kurios?
Saying something like that would be like asking somebody to pick their favorite child. So
right, yeah.
There's always some things that just captivate you a little bit more than others. Yeah. But at the end of the day, because I know these artists as people, I love watching them do what they love. And no matter who it is, I get something out of it every time.
Excellent. Speaking of artists, I'm curious about them and their mindset because you said something that was actually I had the opportunity to watch the show from backstage, so I got to see them prior to going out there. And one of the things that struck me was how normal and relaxed they were backstage, doing things, just chatting with friends, maybe just hanging out, relaxing, not taking a nap, but resting. And then they would go out on stage and do something incredible that like less than 1% of the world can do, come back and then go right back into regular mode. But these things that they're doing are like dangerous. Like they're risking their life when they go out there. How do they manage from a mental point of view, going from relaxed to turning on, going back to relaxed?
That's a fantastic question. And coming from traditional sport, I worked in sport for 11 years before I worked in performing arts. And one of the things that I noticed is that in sport, everything has to be reactionary to what your craft and what your opponent is doing. In circus arts and performing arts, everything is just that repetitiveness of doing it over and over again. So they have the ability, what I've noticed, to literally just turn a switch where they can have a conversation, and when it's time for them to get in that mode, some maybe use 1 minute, some it's a few minutes, but they can just turn it on, and it's like everything else just goes away, and they are so focused and dialed in. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. And much like other athletes, you know when you can have a conversation with somebody, and you know when they're in that moment of they're about to go on stage, we don't have a conversation with them. Mm-hmm. And watching them do it, and then the minute they come off stage, it's like they can just turn it off, and then they're normal again. It's an amazing transition that is very different from sport.
Right. And you mentioned before that you deal mostly, I shouldn't say mostly, your job description would lead people to think that most of what you do involves the artist's bodies and taking care of them physically.
Yes.
But you mentioned a few times how taking care of them mentally is also a large part of it. Can you speak about that just a little bit? Of course.
So when you take anybody who's at the highest possible level, and I would consider Cirque du Soleil artists, they're in the top in the world in their craft. So with that comes pressure. You talked about the risk that they take, all those type of things. So you need to be a really strong, mentally trained athlete or artist. So myself and my team, we try to do a lot to play to that psychology of making sure that they're in the right mindset, that they're focused, that they're in the moment with that, and making sure that they trust the training that they've done. They trust the exercises that they've done, whether they're coming back from an injury or if they're struggling at the end of a long week. Because at the end of the day, they're still human. But there's a reason why these people can continuously do things that amaze us and still be those normal human beings. They have such a huge mental edge, and I think that's what sets them apart. So if we can kind of help to cater to that and make sure that they're really in that moment, that keeps them safe on stage and allows them to to give that amazing performance.
What are some things that you do to keep them there?
Well, trying to keep them in a positive affirmation and like confirming that all of the hard work that they've put in, making sure that they're talking about things that make them happy. Because when anybody can relate to this, when you're happy and you're doing something that you love and you're in a good mood, it feels easy. It doesn't feel like it's work. Whether it's, painting a fence or going for a drive, going for a hike. When you're in a good mindset, you're going to give your best performance. And even though they're performing high-risk activities in front of thousands of people that are wondering if they're going to fail, when they're in a good mindset, they are in complete control of what they're doing.
Got it. Who helps your mindset? It sounds like you have a really tough job, right? Like they're taking care of them physically and mentally, not for just the sake of the show, but for their well-being, and so you have to be on all the time as well. What keeps you motivated and going?
That's a great question. That's something that I talk a lot about to other people that either want to get into this or have gotten into this. I spend a lot of time and effort into my own self-care. And the way I put it is that I cannot even remotely begin to be good for the artists if I haven't taken care of myself. So for me, keeping myself balanced physically, if I love to run, I work out, that balances the uncertainty of what's going to happen in my day. Keeping my heart rate down in a stressful situation. I debrief a lot with my loved ones, with other colleagues. When I've dealt with a stressful situation, I immediately will dissect it, just like watching film, of talking to somebody of how did this make me feel? How did I handle it? Could I have done things better? So that I can be even better for the next time I deal with that situation. If you don't take care of yourself, both mentally and physically, then how can you possibly expect to take care of artists that are depending on you when they're at their worst?
That's a very good point. Very good point. What would you say is, up until now, has been the most... There are lots of fulfilling aspects of your job.
Absolutely.
Do you have any one story or one anecdote in particular that might sum up what it is that is so rewarding about what you do?
Absolutely. Well, so I get into this business because the business of as a healthcare professional, because I love to help people. There's many ways that people can do that, and it's very few that some people can see something, an injury or something that doesn't work from the very beginning till the very end. Like if you're in a clinic, you see somebody that comes in, you've never met them before, and then you rehab their injury, and then they go away. So when I first started in Cirque and they injured themselves on stage, I witnessed the injury, I helped them manage it from the very beginning, I rehab them through it, whether it's weeks or months. The moment that they return onto that stage, when I heard the crowd give them the applause that I know that artist grew up loving to hear, and to know that I witnessed an injury from the very beginning, and I had a huge part getting them back onto that stage, doing what they love, was the most overwhelming feeling of pride and joy, just to be able to say that, yeah, I had a part of this, and I get to see the end result. That was a very powerful thing, and that's one of the things that for me, I think about that every time, that every artist, every individual person that comes in, they deserve that same amount of respect of their injury as a human and as a performer. And I get to be a part of, all right, so this is where we're at. Let's come up with a plan together of how we're going to get you back to what you're doing. And that moment when they come off stage and I give them a high five or a fist bump, and it's like, I know that they know what my role was with that. And that's because we've always been behind the scenes. That's what we are. If I want it to get a lot of credit, I'm in the wrong business. But I know that every artist that comes off that stage, when they've gotten that reward, they know what my contribution's been.
Speaking of behind the scenes, that's a really good way to put it, because what the audience sees from the stage is a very small part of what goes on. Yeah. There's so much that happens behind the scenes and months prior to the show. Is there anything that happens off stage that you wish people knew more about?
I think that because you see the finished product and people see that they're doing these, they look like they're superhuman. I wish that people would realize how much hard work and dedication they put in to just honing their craft and getting better and better. They work tirelessly to just work on their character, to make sure that any little move that they are a perfectionist, like, oh, this one didn't work, but they just want to make a little tweak just to make it even better because they want the next group of audience to be just as captivated. That's something I think people don't realize, how hard things are and how easy they make it look, and how hard they work to make it look that easy.
So coming back to the topic of your job and what you do specifically, high risk situations, accidents can happen. What are some of the protocols that you have to put yourself in the best case scenario to handle a situation?
Yeah. So it's inevitable. This is live entertainment, and these are high level athletes and acrobats that take risks. So, and they're human, so mistakes do happen. We do our very best to prevent any injury we can, and we prepare an emergency response for literally any situation of any part of the show. We pride ourselves in training with our team to be really to be really adapted to emergency response training. We're all emergent first responders, and then we train all of our technicians on the show to be able to help us in any type of a situation. Right. And we train real life scenarios, show conditions once every 2 weeks. So we do with the music, with the sound, everything from where we are in the show, and we time it, we videotape it, and we analyze the video all the time. So that, because our emergency skills are perishable. If you don't practice them all the time, you don't want to be in a situation where something happens and all of a sudden people haven't done something for months. So the more automatic it gets, then the more comfortable people are when something really goes wrong. And we've been very fortunate that you can count on one hand how many times we've had anything in 5 years, but we know that everybody is ready. And that instills confidence in the artists, and that if something happens in the audience, they know that somebody is there to take care of them as soon as possible.
Right, absolutely. So when you practice those during the show conditions, are the artists on stage practicing as well?
No, that's one thing. And
okay.
So there are some artists that like to be part of it.
Oh,
and
really?
Then it also goes back to a lot of artists in circus can be very superstitious. And so a lot of them don't want to know about what happens in a worst case scenario.
I see.
So we try not to involve them unless they want to be part of it. We've had a couple artists that love to be part of it. And that makes it so much easier for us, because they will then know this is what's legitimately going to happen if something were to go wrong. So it puts their mind at ease, because if something goes wrong and you all of a sudden have 6 or 7 people surrounding you, you want to know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't want them to panic. But then it also helps us to be able to do it in a proper way, so that it's real life scenario. It's the right body, we know the body weight of them, all that type of stuff. Because if we were doing anything in the air, we have to have all of our people on clipped in, all that type of stuff, where in real time.
During that time, I want to learn a little bit more about what you're doing while the show is being created. So is it more or less the same routine without the show? You're attending the practices, watching the high-risk acts from the practice facility? Or
It's a little bit of it's both. So the in the studio we have where the training happens all the time. We have our own medical clinic there during a creation phase. So we're doing a lot of stuff. So we're getting to know our team. We're trying to learn what the acts are themselves. So like we talked about with the emergency training, we're creating and thinking about, okay, what possible problems could happen. So we're brainstorming about how we would look at stuff. Also, the majority of the time I'm using to build a rapport with the artist. So that for me is I'm watching training all the time. If I know something is going to be happening in one of the rooms in the studios, I'm in there. I want to watch how they train, how they warm up, what kind of skills are they going to be doing. And by that, now I'm watching how their bodies move. I'm looking to see, are they training too much? Or do they have any bad habits that maybe I want to address with them early? Because some artists might have been doing something for 10 years. Or they might be new and they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing it this way. But my job is I want to keep them on stage as long as possible. So maybe I can notice something biomechanically about their body that I'm trained to look at. Hey, maybe if we do this a little bit different, this is going to add years onto your career, because we're working efficiently and we're working well with our bodies. And then just working on treatments of things of them having to work for such long hours. During the creation phase, when we're doing staging, which is really like being on a movie set, we start at 8 o'clock in the morning and we'd go till 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, wow.
Because they might work on something for 2 hours and they just work it and work it and work it. And then like, you know what? It's not going to work. Scrap it.
Wow.
And it's gone.
Scrap the whole idea.
And then they're like, all right. And then they just move on to something else. So there's a lot of sitting around. So keeping the artist engaged, getting to know about what kind of things they like, getting to know their personalities. That's the stuff that we try to focus on.
Wow. It's amazing to think how many hours of show might have been cut.
Yes. And all of this time, there's no revenue, right? Because they're creating a show that nobody's paying for yet.
Right.
So they're investing all this time, all this money, and that's why they just keep tinkering with it, because it has to be right so that it works at the time when you have your first paying audience.
So, yeah, that's what I want to ask about before the first paying audience. So how do they decide if something is right or not if they don't have any audience feedback?
That's a great question. So they have all these people as part of a creation team that they've been doing this for a long time, and they know what they want it to look like. You have acrobatic creators, you have choreography, music, the wardrobe people, everything, and they do, like, it's almost like focus groups where they bring in the top, like the suits, like the top executives, and they come in and they'll look at it. Then they have these things called Lion's Den, and they're called a Lion's Den because it's just like you're going in there and they could say yes or no just like that.
Oh, wow.
So people might have invested weeks and months on something, and somebody come in and say, nope, change it.
Wow.
And that has happened before.
Has it? Okay.
So that's why they tinker with it for weeks and months, so that when they have a Lion's Den, which usually happens about almost a month before, like mid-March.
So this happens every show. Every show has
Every show will have, they usually will have the first, second, and third Lion's Den, which happens like kind of in week increments, like every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So the first one is about a month before the first show. So a show will typically premiere the third week of April. So let's say first to second week of March is the first Lion's Den. That's the first group of people, and maybe 40 or 50 people that are watching a show from start to finish. And before that, maybe a month before that, you'll have a group of maybe 10 people that are watching a specific act. I want to see how this act looks. So then the first Lion's Den will be there, show goes start to finish. Then they'll give notes. All right, we need to change this, change that. So you have 2 weeks. 2 weeks to work on it, Lion's Den 2. So it's the same people plus a few more. And then Lion's Den 3 is maybe like 3 weeks, or maybe 2 weeks before the first paying audience. People have already bought their tickets, and they still might make changes 2 weeks before the show.
That is so much pressure.
Exactly, and that's why there's so much pressure. People's jobs and their creative control is on the line, and there's a huge risk involved. And then when the first crowd is paying and people go crazy, and that's why for us, it was such a monumental success that everybody was so thrilled with the final product that was delivered. But it's a testament to the hard work of everybody on stage.
That's amazing. That is amazing. You've worked with athletes, like sports athletes,
Yes.
right? And multiple sports. And you've worked with circus performers. Can you talk a little bit about the similarities and differences in, I guess, both their psychology and in their physiology?
Absolutely. So I would say the one similarity is that high-level athletes, they know their bodies better than anyone. I know the medical portion of that, and I know the biomechanics, and that's one of the things that I use them so much in helping me to guide what they need. That I can talk to them about something that's not working right, but if I don't know what they're feeling and how their body moves, then it's just useless information. So them being in tune with their bodies is a huge asset of what they are able to do. That's one of the things that I've seen in sport and in performing arts, that they are just so in touch with their bodies. Some of the ways that they differ is that circus performers can be very particular about their bodies, and like if one thing isn't working right, they just focus on it, and they're like, oh, it just doesn't feel right because this isn't working. And some athletes in sport are like, okay, well, because they're used to having to adapt on the fly because of opponents and just the nature of what they do. Sometimes that's something that it's not that big of a deal. But at the end of the day, like their psychology of just being so focused on what they do is it's parallel across the board. They're just so dialed in, and it's just amazing to watch them do their craft.
I know you said on Kurios show in particular, we have folks from how many countries?
16 different countries represented on our show.
That's pretty wild. Yeah. Can you talk a bit about how language works backstage?
Yeah, so the official touring language is English, because they need to be able to communicate globally with all parties involved. But we do have some people that don't speak English very well. So with that, the company is not going to pay just to have everyone have their own personal interpreter. So the artists are encouraged to learn a base level of English, and it pretty much is for medical issues. So be able to say, this has pain and this doesn't. We're fortunate enough that some of the languages that don't translate well to English of artists we have some Spanish-speaking artists and some Russian-speaking artists. But we have some full-time in wardrobe and stage management that speak Portuguese and Spanish, so they could help with translation as necessary. And we have our assistant artistic director and our head coach that speaks Russian fluently. So then if we ever had that issue, then we have somebody that could immediately help to translate with us.
Have you yourself picked up any Russian or Spanish?
A little bit. They usually like to teach you the bad words.
Of course.
Yeah, but simple things like hello, how are you, thank you, you're welcome, just things to kind of show that you're making an effort.
Right.
But medical things are very difficult to pick up in someone in a different language.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's why it can be difficult for an artist to try to talk to me about what they're feeling about with pain. So that's why I will always bring in somebody so that they can fluently and openly talk in their own language.
It'd be counterproductive for them not to be able to do that.
Because they might just say pain, whereas for you and I might just say, well, it's a little bit sore, but it's not that bad.
Right.
So they can kind of really give a scale on how they feel, and then it can be translated better to me to help to guide where I want to go.
All right, to finish up here, I'd like to ask you a question about your job and advice that you might have for anyone listening that is interested in the human body, perhaps studying kinesiology or physiotherapy, and what they could do now while in school to prepare for a career in that.
I think that the biggest piece of advice that I tell people is surround yourself with good people and contact good mentors. I have been doing this for a long time, and I still connect with my mentors. If this is something you want to do, find people, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, connect with those people. Let them know that this is what you want to do, and observe them, pick their brain, ask them about their experiences, things that they would look out for, and create a rapport. From a technical side, learn as much as you can, get your hands on as many different types of bodies as possible. The biggest mistake somebody can make is only focusing on one type of thing. Like, I only want to deal with basketball players, and that's it. Then you're going to learn everything there is to know about basketball, but not about all the other ways that the body is moved. That's why when I was in sport, I worked with so many different types of athletes, and that's what really helped me be successful in Cirque, because all the different acts in Cirque, they move their bodies and use their bodies very differently. So the more exposure you can get to getting your hands on how different bodies feel healthy and injured, it's going to create that memory of like, oh, well, I know how this felt on this person, because nothing is the same as it is in a textbook. And you can learn as much as you can, but the real world of touching somebody's body, of how it feels injured, and the difference of your knee to my knee to her knee, everybody's so different. So really just using and continuing to learn, that's going to be the best piece of advice.
All right, and there you have it. Thank you everyone for listening today. I'd love to hear from you, so please send your comments, thoughts, or questions, or just say hi at hello@inspiretokyo.com. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please share it with a friend. We are always looking for new listeners. And be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcasts. See you next time.